Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our seventh Alumni Insights session. This evening, we're going to be diving into the world of marketing and PR in the arts, and we've got two very interesting speakers lined up for you. Destiny Forbes, who's marketing coordinator at the Studio Museum in Harlem, New York, and Brooke Eastman, who's a senior account executive at the cultural communications agency Sutton, which was actually founded by a Courtauld alumnus, Callum Sutton, in 2006. Both Destiny and Brooke completed their MA at the Courtauld in 2018, so they actually know each other, which is nice. So a very warm welcome to you both, and we're looking forward to hearing more about your work. Without further delay, I'm going to just hand right over to Brooke to get things started. So Brooke, if you're ready, over to you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you guys so much for having me. As mentioned, my name is Brooke Eastman, and I completed my MA at the Courtauld in 2018, studying with Professor David Peters Corbett. And since then, I have been working with Sutton Communications, which is a global communications and cultural strategy agency with offices in London, New York, and Hong Kong. And I have worked in the New York branch since the beginning of 2019. So as part of my work, I work with around 6 to 8 clients at any given time, and those are museums, galleries, individual artists, art fairs, nonprofits, art tech startups, kind of anything you name it, on specific press campaigns as well as sort of broader institutional strategy. And a little bit about me, I'm currently based in London, but continuing to work for the New York office and with primarily US-based clients. So for me, I really didn't get into PR until I actually completed my MA. When I was in university, I often held term time or summer internships at different museums. And then when I graduated with my BA in 2016, I started working for a couple art tech startups that are based here in London. So I definitely had dipped my toes in a lot of different sides of the art world by the time that I came to do my MA at the Courtauld. And I actually learned a little bit more about Sutton through a Courtauld Careers event that they did in the spring of my graduating year. And that really, I think for me, piqued my interest. And then it ended up that someone from my MA course got their summer internship in London. And then through her, I ended up hearing about the New York internship, which is how I started off at Sutton and have been there 2.5 years since. So very much a non-linear path, kind of came to PR a little later, but I think one of the great things about PR is that so many of the skills that you kind of hone at the Courtauld are so applicable. I think some of the most important skills, it's writing, it's editing, it's being able to talk about art fluently, and it's really trying to find stories and angles that haven't been told before. And so, my day-to-day job kind of looks like reading a lot, which is great. I get, I have my subscriptions to all the different newspapers and magazines, and I just spend a lot of time reading and then writing and editing press releases and pitching journalists, connecting with my clients on a weekly basis. And then a larger part of my job in the past year has really been building campaign and overarching institutional strategies. So, particularly since the onset of the pandemic, is really thinking critically about not only where an institution currently is, but where it sees itself in 5 years. And how do we best achieve, how do we get there through creative storytelling, through media placements, through profile raising. And, I think in my opinion, people often think of people in PR as being very outgoing and good at talking, and I think that there are so many ways to be good in this field. I have so many colleagues who are more on the introverted side, and the key is really building those meaningful relationships, whether that's with your clients or with journalists. What really matters is sort of those long-lasting relationships that you can forge with people, because you know, pitching a journalist becomes so much easier when you've met them for coffee. And, you know, it's, you write a lot of emails and sometimes they go unanswered, and you have to become a very resilient person and understand that, you know, just have to keep putting yourself out there. Um, and and I think one of the highlights of my job is, I mean, the incredible artists that I've had the opportunity to work with, you know, from working on Kehinde Wiley's monumental sculpture that was unveiled in Times Square and then moved to the Virginia Museum of Fine Arts, to working with Mark Bradford and Shanique Smith. You know, it's really incredible to get to work so closely with the artists who are really defining our moment, and also getting to tell stories that haven't historically been told, and really seeing the concrete impact that PR and media can have on an artist's career and can help to really shape the future of the art historical canon. Yeah, and I think my best piece of advice, if you're interested in getting into PR, is just read as much as you can get your hands on from different publications, because so much of pitching and building strategy is knowing, you know, what these publications cover, knowing their voice, knowing what their each, you know, writer and editor is interested in, and how the story you want to tell can fit into that. Yeah, just read as much as possible. And, you know, obviously right now is a very difficult time if you're looking for jobs. So, you know, be patient with yourself and keep emailing people. I think cold emailing is, you know, I do it every day in my job, and it's also so good for you on like a personal and professional scale to just connect with as many people as possible.
Thanks, Brooke. That's got us off to such a good start. Already some key themes, some of my favourite themes are coming through. So you finished there on talking about networking, making connections with people, getting in touch with people. If it's something that you find difficult, then just getting started is really the best advice I can give. But, you know, there are lots of people here who might be able to help you with that as well. I also like the fact that you talked about already, this is not a linear career necessarily. There aren't that many people who I speak to as students who want to get into PR, but people do come to it later. And I'll sometimes talk to people about, well, if you want to do writing or really be involved in the art world in a way that you're seeing some great work and having a real impact on the art world itself, PR is a great way of doing it. So thank you so much, Brooke, for bringing up some of those really key themes so early on. So let's go to Destiny.
Yes. Hi, everyone. My name is Destiny Forbes. I am an arts marketing professional based in New York. I currently work at the Studio Museum in Harlem as marketing coordinator. I graduated from the Courtauld in 2018 with Brooke, and I studied with Rebecca Arnold for the documenting fashion special option. And I wrote my MA thesis re-examining 1960s civil rights photography through the lens of dress. So I also did not have a linear kind of approach to working in the art world. I just kind of knew, like, prior to going to grad school, I had experience working directly with artists, a lot of them like multi-hyphenate, mixed media, like visual, but also performance, you know, theater, musicians, like those kinds of artists, like still coming up, trying to find their space, their place, and their voice within the art world. So that was kind of my entry point. And it was not until after my MA where I felt like, okay, I really feel like I can officially have my like debut in the art world, whatever that meant, right? And to be quite honest, I thought things would just kind of come to me quite easily. I mean, the Courtauld is such an incredible institution. I was surrounded by so many intelligent people, has such an incredible alumni network. I was like, I'm definitely like just set up, like everything's gonna just happen. But of course that, there's a lot of work that's still being done, right? That to make these moves possible. So after my MA, I was kind of confused. I was like, I want to work in a museum because I feel like that is the art world. And I had not had museum experience before. So I actually got a year-long postgraduate internship at the Whitney. And then while I was doing that, I had a fellowship as a storytelling fellow at a small arts nonprofit, which is so incredible and so amazing, based in Harlem. Actually, they just relocated to Bed-Stuy in Brooklyn, which is so great for them, to a brick and mortar space called the Laundromat Project, which is an artist in residency program that serves artists who are interested in art that has a very like social justice, social impact practice around that. So that was just like an amazing perspective because I had this very like larger institution, American art, which is what I wanted. But then I was also like working directly with artists again, which is what I had my experience previously with. And honestly, I think for me, the most rewarding part of that kind of year of navigating like, oh, should I try and become a curator? Is that for me? Or like, what's my place and space within the arts world? So that the Laundromat Project was a very important fellowship for me in that it helped me decenter my ego in a way, which is something that I continuously try to do on a daily basis. In that, I think, I had definitely tools and I still have tools to equip myself, but there's always this process of learning and unlearning that we have to continue to go back to and re-find ourselves within a new context. And that was such a pivotal moment for me. I was able to interview this one cultural practitioner, and I'll just never forget when she was like, "It's not about you, boo." And it was so meaningful for me. She wasn't saying it to me directly, but just kind of in general, like the art space, navigating it, and the people we interact with. That was just really just humbling and something I always kind of just took to heart as I was feeling kind of unsure and just still figuring out where I wanted to go. And that kind of helped me recommit to or relearn what marketing could be within like this arts context. For me, it's a lot of deep listening. It's a more holistic approach. It's both quantitative and qualitative at the same time. It's incredibly meaningful. Working directly with artists to help realize, either if it's helping artists and curators realizing a particular exhibition or a particular program, just something that speaks fully to their practice in their own words. So it's a lot of deep listening, but then also there's some real tangible skills with marketing as well. There's content marketing, there's brand strategy, there's also design. I was realizing that this world that I thought was just only about numbers and just statistics was actually a lot more creative and a lot more flexible than what I had thought previously. So that was just kind of an amazing and like also a crazy year. So after that, I applied for a communications assistant position at the studio museum, and then was quickly promoted to marketing coordinator. So I handle all of the general public external messaging, from our weekly newsletters to social, which is just, you know, social media is so fun and crazy and exhausting and changes all the time. So just like Brooke, you have to be like on it, reading all these articles, getting the Google alerts, you know. It's just, there's so many pieces at play all the time. But I'm kind of rambling now. Let me look. There's some questions to help guide me. Hold on. So yeah, what is a transferable skill that I take from my time at the Courtauld? Definitely centering storytelling and centering the object, but now it's less really about object for me and more about people. So I'm always about centering the person, the artist. I have the privilege and opportunity of working with phenomenal artists of color who are living, and it's about telling their story and their words, learning always from the artist. That's something that am growing into now, and like know more than ever, working in a professional space. Artists are our biggest teachers, and again, that's a humbling perspective too. Like as historians, you think you're writing, right, all of this, but no, it's always about the artist, right? And they know so much more than you, and that kind of decentering and moving that relationship piece. Just kind of a different pedagogical approach to that, I think, is really important. So just finding new and meaningful ways to storytell that don't feel contrived, don't feel forced or pressured, that's in service of like a bigger mission of amplifying and providing space for people to write their own histories, especially, again, speaking personally as a person of color, as an Afro-Latina. Like it's so important that to be in these positions to write copy, you know, that can, these boilerplate languages, like this boilerplate language, to be kind of at the center of that, and to have your voice and your words kind of position and recontextualize a lot of things that people can kind of take for granted. But yeah, so that's a bit about me. And yeah, I think I'm good to end right now.
Thank you so much. That was also so very, very interesting. So again, you were talking about it not being linear, that you have to take your steps as things occur to you, and maybe you have some learning in one role that makes you realize what you want to do next. I think that's all really interesting. There was some research a while ago that said that graduates in the current landscape are likely to have 6 or 7 completely distinct careers. So whenever you're taking a step, it's just a step that's right for you right now. I really liked your point about having skills and tools, but that you're always learning and unlearning depending on the context in which you're in and who you're working with. And I think that's a lesson for all of us, actually. I really love that phrase, and I'm going to really reflect on that. And again, talking about deep listening, working with artists and curators, and that there's more creativity there than you expect. I think one of the things that I sometimes hear from people who don't know what kind of career they want is they want to work with the art or with the artist, and they think that the best way to do that is through curating. But actually, what's this opened up to me, and I have said this to some extent, is marketing and PR in the modern world are actually doing a lot more of that than I think they used to do in the past, in more challenging circumstances, because the art is getting more challenging and more interesting. So I think those are both really fabulous introductions. Thank you so much for that. We have an early question, which is fabulous. It's for Brooke, but I'm going to repurpose it so that it's for both of you. So I'll start with Brooke. How do I find my way in the agency landscape in London if I'm looking for entry-level roles? Where do I start?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, obviously, I've never really done the agency job search within London. I did it more in New York, but I think a great starting place is just kind of doing your research about what are the options, you know, who are the handful of agencies that are kind of really dominating the conversation within your specific city. and potentially, because any agency will have a website which says, which clients they work with. And that's a great tool as well for you to see, okay, who is working with who, and, what am I interested in? I mean, I think at most places, the way to get in is from the ground up. And, it's such a fast paced way of working, that I think it's just so helpful to come in often as an intern or very like entry level employee and just learn as much as you possibly can. I was really fortunate to be a part of Sutton's internship program, which is a paid internship program, and I think that that is so important, moving, forward. I think the UK is a lot better about paying interns, but the US can tend to be a little behind on that. So yeah, I think, cold emailing people and companies that you're interested in working for, even if it's just with like a speculative resume, and also trying to find people, through LinkedIn at those companies who, maybe are have a similar background or went to the same school, or um, you know, are 5 years ahead of you and you think that's where I'd really like to be. I think just like shooting somebody a message on LinkedIn, asking to grab, a virtual or outdoor coffee is so helpful. I did that when I was looking for jobs and spoke with a few people at Sutton, and that was just so incredibly helpful to learn a little bit more about their day to day, and then to make sure that when, my CV was being read, they remembered the name. So I think that, you know, networking is very important. Seeing what opportunities are out there and just trying to best fit your skills to the brief. And the nice thing about agencies is that you get such a bird's eye view of the arts landscape. And I think that has been incredible to just understand the arts ecosystem from a totally different perspective. Yeah, I hope that's helpful, is like, do your homework, know who the key players are, email as many people as possible to, connect, grab coffee, even just Zoom. I mean, I moved to a new city in November of last year in the middle of a pandemic, and I've just been, networking since I moved here just to connect to the arts community because I am a recent transplant. So yeah, I think you never stop building your network, and it doesn't have to, be a defined like I want to work somewhere, so I will email them. So just keep networking and meeting new and interesting people, and then, take any opportunity you can from the ground floor up and just get in there and learn as much as you can. That was helpful.
Yeah, that's a really good summary of some excellent advice. I think that you summarized that really beautifully. So Destiny, you're not working for an agency where you might have lots of different clients. You're very much in-house. So yeah, where you work is your client in effect.
Yeah.
And you work with a variety of artists and curators to deliver on the support for all of those shows and individuals. Do you want to talk a bit about whether, is it similar advice for getting an entry into that kind of career, or are there some alternatives as well? What's the balance? But how is it similar or different?
Yeah, definitely networking, so important always. I'm always, actually I was talking to someone about this earlier today. Like, yes, I do work in-house, but the artists, right, and these kind of exhibitions, like they do feel kind of like their own unique, they're our own unique clients in a way, too. I think an additional thing I'll add, especially kind of for marketing, in that the field is changing so much and there's so many different types of skill sets within it, to really just try, like, become a self-starter and learn different like skills. And by skills, I mean, like, if you've kind of dabbled in like Adobe, like the creative suite, like take a class on it. Like that's very important knowledge to have. And yeah, you can learn it on the ground, but even being able to put in your resume, like, oh, I'm currently taking a class to learn how to edit in Premiere Pro and stuff like that. That looks really good. Or like Google Analytics, like you're trying to figure out, because the field is so large and so broad, it's trying to give you as much, you're trying to position yourself with as much tools and insights to be understand that changing landscape. And it's actually really fun. Coursera is really great. A lot of institutions, of course, have different like design classes. I just think something that I'm learning now, that like having a design skill is just very important to have that kind of, or even just to be able to communicate with external stakeholders who are fully creative based, to be able to use the language that they're using intuitively to kind of make getting deliverables and different types of assets as smooth as a process as possible.
Again, that's a really good and useful set of skills that you've described there. I'm sure that would be very helpful. And I think it's good to start from that entry level, because so many people will be thinking about that. I'm going to ask a little cheeky question myself now, and it's kind of in two parts. So one is, what do you think the particular challenges have been of the current time that students or graduates who are now looking either to go into the first role or a different role might be? And kind of linked to that, what do you think are the challenges that might still be in the arts more generally around diversity and recruitment, and how can people overcome those? Brooke, do you want to take that first? So it's two parts. The one about the challenges of the current pandemic and the limitations of that, but also diversity more generally, and has that made it worse, or other ways to get over that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the pandemic has been such a pressure cooker that has brought so many issues that have always been issues really to the surface and to the forefront of conversation and change. I mean, I think from sort of a specifically PR side of things, it's been really difficult for a lot of arts institutions and organizations and galleries who have had to close their doors to the public and pivot to presenting art in a digital way. I think you certainly see that museums and galleries who had already invested in digital resources were the most agile when like the physical doors started closing. And then also just, I think, what stories we're telling is something that's really been at the forefront of the conversations that we've been having at Sutton and with my clients, and really thinking concretely. And as Destiny mentioned, is like, how do we tell stories in a way that doesn't feel contrived or canned or the same old story, and who we give platforms to. And I think that one advantage of a lot of things happening digitally and on social media this past year, I mean, you even see with the rise of platforms like TikTok, is a further kind of democratization of who has a platform and a way to connect with people, in a way that isn't just the traditional power structure of these are the people at the top and they're the ones who get to tell the story. So I think those are just some sort of PR specific challenges that we've been working with this past year. And I think in terms of diversity and representation within the field, within the art world, I think there is so much to be done, and that is a complete understatement. I think it's so important for arts organizations to be paying people a livable wage at every single level, no matter whether you're an intern or working front of house in a museum. I think that that is so crucial to just, taking down some barriers to access. I think also thinking really differently about, you know, where we're looking for candidates and what kind of language or barriers we're putting on, um, you know, job briefs and application forms. And, you know, it's it's just, I think we need to do, as an industry, sort of a complete overhaul of, recruitment processes. I mean, I think also the nature of recruitment now is, especially at like institutions and bigger companies, is everything is going through an AI algorithm to kind of select for, um, you know, the meeting the certain level who gets to like go to the next round of interviews and whatnot. And that can be really, challenging if you don't know the tricks to like, match your exact words to the exact same words that they put in the job application. And I think sometimes people think of computer algorithms as being completely unbiased, but they're not. They're created by humans ultimately, and all humans have biases. And so I think it's, kind of starting to really think concretely about how we're recruiting, and also making sure that there is representation throughout a structure of a company. Because yes, you can hire interns who are from diverse backgrounds, but if they don't have systems of support from within the company, and if there aren't, if the people with seat at the senior table don't, if there isn't representation there, then there's nobody who, really has the say to make change happen. um, and so I think it's making sure that there is diversity represented throughout the structure of a company, and that it's not only, acknowledged and included, but like really valued. And sometimes too, that's looking at people from outside of our industry who can offer a fresh perspective and who haven't necessarily been in the art world for, 10 years or whatever. I mean, sorry, there's so many thoughts I have about this, but I think that's hopefully sort of a starting point. Yeah, we all have a long way to go, and a lot of change that will continue to be happened, or continue to be made. It's a long process.
Yes, and I think all of these are sorts that you've raised are things that we're all thinking about and are involved in our own organisations. I quite like the point as well, though, about the democratisation of platforms. Certainly, when I first started out, there were some very rigid traditional routes that you took to get into certain professions, and those are starting to loosen up. There are more ways now that you can come up with your own online gallery or curated show or whatever, and it changes things for some people. I think if you have the chutzpah to go ahead and do that. Destiny, do you have any additional thoughts on the impact of the pandemic, for good or ill, and around the challenges of diversity in whichever form?
Yeah, I mean, okay, I'm not on mute. I always am so appreciative that I've worked in institutions, especially the Studio Museum, that has been doing the work, right, on diversity since its inception, since 1968. So these are constant conversations that we're having on a daily basis. So I'm very fortunate to work in an organization, an institution that, number one, sees that and holds that as a priority, not just for them as a space, but across the whole entire arts sector, to be a champion and advocate of that cause. And I think now more than ever, we're thinking about what like diversity means too, beyond race. It means, making things more accessible in terms of making sure being mindful of people who are using like screen readers, an apology for the sirens in the back, New York. But just making sure the content that we're creating, the words that we're showing, the images are as like the most accessible as possible, thinking about audio guides, just like what does it mean to have a fully accessible art experience for everyone. And again, just kind of learning and listening from different people who are right at the forefront of arts and accessibility as a practice, and just deeply listening and deeply learning. And something too, just on a more like professional level, something that I find is so important, that I didn't get that it was already a thing. And then I realized I was just doing it, but which I guess good for me, but you've probably heard, but definitely like lean in, especially during like bigger meetings. Like if someone has like an idea, something I've noticed too, sometimes you have like a large meeting, there's a lot of people, someone could say something really great and then it gets like lost. And that's where kind of things slip, voices feel unheard, unsupported. So something that I kind of hold and carry with me on a day-to-day basis is just really listening to what someone has said and acknowledging that in like a meaningful way, not just saying that's a great point, but being like, okay, how can I be of service to help enact this, right? So I think that just kind of adds to the voices, adds to just everything that a company organization is doing. Yeah.
Myself. Do you think there's anything in particular that has been a benefit of the pandemic? Do you think, because I think Brooke made a very good point about the democratization of platforms. Is there anything else you think that perversely has been quite a good thing around the pandemic and lockdowns?
Yes, definitely, like this emphasis on, digital content, bringing it to the fore, rather. That's something that's always been really important to me, and to have it so centered now, I think is very great. I will say that the speed, as content, and such a broad term too, sometimes it feels weird saying it, but sometimes as the production increases, so does the demand, of course. So I find, like Brooke, I'm sure, working incredibly long hours on a constant basis. Still, it's like meaningful work, of course, because it's in service of just so many amazing people and like the work that they're creating. But there's definitely a need for rest, and rest is a revolution, rest is a movement. And I just always have to kind of remember that and hold that too. So that's one thing.
Very good. Yeah, that famous life-work balance that actually is harder when you're always at home, much harder. We have one more question in the chat, so I'm going to encourage everyone to put their final ideas for questions in the chat. Otherwise, I will have a couple to ask at the end. What persuades a gallery or dealer to promote the work of a particular artist? Who wants to take that?
I mean, I can try and start. And I mean, I think that's what's been interesting about my work too, is that I work with galleries of so many different sizes, from smaller, more boutique galleries in New York to some of the larger mega galleries that have global locations. And, everybody is looking for something completely different. And every gallery and gallerist or dealer has their own perspective and point of view. I mean, I do largely think that, people really gravitate towards stories and perspectives that they haven't heard before. And somebody who's really adding something totally new to the conversation or doing something in a way that hasn't, been done before. And sometimes that can be, quite challenging to stand out in such a market that's rich with so much talent, talent that's both established and also talent that hasn't been discovered yet, or not discovered, but acknowledged on a wider public scale. So I think, it's somebody with a really unique perspective, somebody that is also kind of both in touch with current conversations as well as, and this is a bit abstract, but conversations we haven't had yet. I always think of there are so many fascinating artists doing things that, they've done things for years that only sort of come into the public consciousness and conversation after time, after they've been doing them for years and decades. So I think really it's, in my perspective, and it's so broad, but it just comes down to, what you really have to say at the core of the work.
Do you want to add anything to that, Destiny?
Yeah, I mean, I can't speak for the gallery space, for-profit space, but I think when we're thinking about programming, something that we hold dear is it in line with our values and our mission? So always referring back to that as a point of reference, right? How is the artist or their work advancing, or providing a different perspective on these values that we hold dear as an institution? And I think that's really meaningful in order to advance the conversation or a particular conversation.
Excellent. Hopefully that answers that question. Now, someone in the chat very kindly offered to give some of their thoughts from their long communications and PR career. So I'm just going to share that with you now. They've suggested that one of the things that you can do is learn how the media in the UK or whatever country you wish to work in, how does the media work? Who owns what? If it's rolling news, is it state-owned or something else? So, for example, learn how the BBC works. And really reinforces what both of our speakers have said, making contacts with people in the media as well as within your own kind of art world. The arts is full of terrific stories, that's true, but it's good to link the story to some other aspect of life. I think that's quite profound and interesting insight, and a great benefit from having alumni in the audience with us today. So it's about 20 past. I'm going to ask one more question, and then I'm going to ask the speakers to come up with just 2 or 3 insights or bits of advice for actions that people might do. And I'm going to start you thinking about that a little bit by saying, if you think back to your time at the Courtauld, what's the one thing you wish you knew then that you know now? So what do you wish you could have found out earlier? Destiny, do you want to start?
Oh, okay. Yes. What is one thing that I wish I'd known earlier? Well, I wish I'd known that it was it's not so easy. You got to work at your profession, constant work. You got to put in the effort to see the effort, sweat equity. So that's something I really wish I'd learned. And also too, I think while I was there, I should have done more kind of networking moments while I was there during that year, in addition to my studies and whatnot. I think that would have been really helpful too, instead of holding it off till the very end, after I had just handed in my dissertation. So yeah, ongoing throughout the year, but yeah.
Great, that's great. I think that's good advice. I say that to people all the time. Don't wait till you're just nearly finished. You should be doing it from the beginning. Yeah. It doesn't always work, I'm afraid, but I keep saying it in the hope that sometime it will. Okay, Brooke, do you have anything that you wish you'd known then?
I mean, it's going to sound quite similar, but the importance of networking, I'm, both from a personal sense, but then also in the, the field that I've gotten into, it is a part of my everyday life, is building those contacts, those relationships, and then just continuing to nurture them. And I think it's also about um, that I had wished or I had known earlier, is that it's not, networking is not only to kind of directly connect you to one job or one person, or it's not linear always. And I think that, you know, you it's always valuable. It's not just, okay, I network when I'm looking for jobs and that's, when I do it. I think it is something that you should kind of constantly be practicing. I mean, I found out about my internship through my network. I, have built up this network through my job. And I have also built a network with, the people who graduated from my same MA special option in the years following. They have reached out to me on LinkedIn and we've developed, really wonderful friendships, even though we've never met in person. Um, and I think that the art world can feel very daunting when you're trying to get into it. And, I'm someone where it took me a while, both times that I graduated, to find my next um, opportunity. And so I do think, keep trying, be patient with yourself, and, be kind to yourself and recognize that, it's an incredibly competitive field and it's even more of a challenging time to be looking. Yeah, and that, networking is a constant practice that I think is always going to serve you, and not in a, sort of obvious, like, I got this out of this conversation, but just, yeah, building those relationships. Because I'm always amazed at when I look at some of the more senior people in my office, how many people in the art world they know and how many relationships they have built over the course of years and decades, and just how important those are. So yeah, as much as it seems so painful when you like start networking, it only gets easier over time. Yeah.
That's really interesting you make that point, because I think some people are naturally happy to talk to strangers or to people they've met through other people. Do you have any advice on, if it's something you really struggle with, how do you make a connection? Is there something in the wording in a message on LinkedIn, or is there a way to do it? Do you do it at a certain point when it's just really open and you're still exploring? What's the point that for you helped break the back of starting that, when perhaps it wasn't an easy thing to do?
Yeah, I mean, I've got a little like formula. I find that like a really simple subject line, like, you know, I'd say if it's someone who's maybe at a similar level as you, keeping it really casual, like hi plus coffee question mark. That's my go-to.
Mm.
Um, And if it's maybe somebody who's a bit more senior, um, and they've got like a school in common with you, I'll say like Courtauld graduate interested in this, this, and this. So those are my kind of two approaches. If it's somebody who's like more your age or similar age group, and then somebody who's a little bit more senior, and then just a really kind of short, tight message introducing yourself. And saying, why you reached out to them, why what you find interesting about what they do, um, and that you just love to connect, and like you understand their schedule is busy, but if they have time, like you'd love to just have the chance to speak. And I mean, I would say that keeping it like short, sweet, simple, and focused on how interesting what they do is so much better than being like, hi, I'm all of these things. Here's my CV. Like, let me tell you why I would be a great fit. No, I think that people are way more willing to agree to speak with you if you're short, sweet, and focus on them. And I mean, honestly, like, I feel like for the most part, if I kind of keep to those things, I get, you know, maybe a 60 to 80% response rate. So, and then if somebody doesn't respond, don't take it personally. Everyone is busy, they miss things. So, you know, just, and sometimes it helps if you just send out like 10 emails at once, because then you don't even remember who didn't respond. You just think they're a wash.
The
Yeah.
rejection. Yeah.
That's such great advice to finish on. Did you have any final points as well, Destiny?
No, literally everything that Brooke said, spot on. I love that moment where you said networking is ongoing, and that's something that I'm like writing down. Like, yes, that's always, it's not just for a different season. So I really love that you said that, Brooke. But yeah, just I also sometimes take an unconventional approach. So yes, LinkedIn, conventional, but I've also had great response via DM on Instagram, and it depends on of course, you know, the type of fields. Like sometimes I'd be just really interested in like meeting with artists. I have like an emerging freelance practice as well. So just kind of connecting via Instagram seems to be the better of like the platforms to do that. So yeah, just kind of like seeing where they're most active and following that. But yeah.
That's really great advice as well. This is very encouraging to me, because this is all the sort of things that I say to students all the time. And I really love it when I'm speaking to real people out there doing it who are still doing the same thing. So I'm not out of date. That's very encouraging. And I really love this idea that keep it simple. Find a way, a formula that works for you with different people. The only thing I might advise differently is I keep a record of everyone I'm in touch with, so that when they do come back, I know who it is and what I've said to them, because I don't have a very good memory. So it might work differently for some people.
No, I definitely keep an Excel spreadsheet.
Exactly. You're a woman after my own heart. I have very good Excel spreadsheets. So we're very much coming to the end of our time. Thank you so much to everybody who's attended and engaged in the chat, and particularly from our veteran and very experienced PR person who shared their thoughts. Thank you very much to our guests. I've thoroughly enjoyed our conversation. I can't believe it went so quickly. There's been such a wealth of good advice and interesting insights. I've definitely taken a few phrases away for me to reflect on as well, which is a sign of a really good session. So it really just remains for me to say, please fill in the feedback form. The girls will put that into the chat for you now, and I'll hand over to Imogen just to say the final thank yous and goodbyes.
More for me. Yeah, thanks, Karen. And thank you so much, Brooke and Destiny. That was a really informative session. And actually, if anyone would like to rewatch that further down the line, because there's a lot of very concrete advice given, you can watch the recording, which will be on YouTube. We'll upload it to the alumni playlist in about a week's time. So I recommend that you go back and watch again if you need to. So our next event is coming up very soon, actually next Thursday on the 6th of May, and it's the much anticipated journalism event. So keep your eyes on your inbox and on social media for more details about our speakers, and that should be a really good session, so I hope you can join us. And that concludes the evening. Thanks again to our guest speakers. It was really good getting to know you, and thank you all for attending. Good evening, and we'll see you next time. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.